I'm joined tonight by Professor Abel Esterhuyse from the School for Security and Africa Studies at Stellenbosch University. Prof, good evening. Thanks for your time. So the announcement then tonight around the extension of the ceasefire for 2 days, what is it that you believe they'll be able to accomplish in that 2 days?
Well, the agreement is in essence one of the release of 10 more hostages for every additional day that the fighting is sort of in a lull and in pause. But let me say that we are sitting here with some challenges, and we have to perhaps think about the negotiation processes and what underpinned this deal. You know, there's logistical problems because not all of the roughly 240 people, mostly Israelis, taken into Gaza during the October 7 attack were being held by Hamas. Between 40 and 50, they reckoned, were held by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or some other militant group. And so the truce agreement requires Hamas, not another group, to hand over the hostages in exchange for the Palestinian prisoners. And so even if Hamas is willing to extend the truce, it may actually struggle to locate the additional hostages. And so we need time for a bit of coordination within Gaza, and we know that communications within Gaza have been degraded by the Israeli airstrikes. There's another critical issue here, I think, and you know, extending the truce in exchange for the release of some hostages could pose, I think, strategic problems for Israel and Hamas. The hostages, in a way, is the only real leverage that Hamas really have over Israel, and so releasing more hostages, they're actually giving up the only real, what should one say, leverage they have. And then, of course, for the Israelis, it allows them to achieve one of their war ends, and that is to secure the release of the Israeli hostages. But another of their war ends, and that is to destroy Hamas, will become even harder the more they extend the truce. And then, of course, there's military realities that one has to consider here. You know, from a military perspective, this is what is normally referred to as an operational pause. Operational pauses typically are used to gather more information, to replenish, refill, reload the forces, to make new plans. And so this may actually be more beneficial for statutory forces like the IDF than for revolutionary type forces like Hamas, that is relatively isolated in Gaza, though it will allow them to bring in more aid to the Palestinian population in general.
Prof, sorry to interject there. Just on the issue of hostages, given how central they are to this deal and sort of what we have seen in the initial 4 days of this truce, how important is the issue of data around these hostages, and is it accurate, especially after you've given the dynamic between Hamas and some of the other players that could well be having hostages in you know, that are currently holding some people hostage?
Well, I think it plays into the bigger problem of intelligence, you know, and I think this is a critical issue, especially perhaps from an Israeli perspective, because Israel, perhaps more than any other of the parties to the conflict, knows perhaps and has a better idea of precisely how many hostages has been taken by Hamas. for Hamas and many of the other groups, they may not have such a clear idea as to how many hostages they actually took on the day. And some of the people that the Israeli government may consider to be hostages may actually be killed and may not be part of the hostages that's being kept by Hamas. So this is part of a broader intelligence problem, I think, that both the parties to the conflict are struggling with at the moment.
I imagine there's also something to be said, just the fact that there has been this extension of the truce. The role of Qatar has been really central at the negotiating table, alongside that of Egypt and, of course, also the United States. What is it going to take to get the negotiations to go beyond this temporary truce that we see? And is the current moment ripe for that, to keep pushing it out as much as possible?
Yeah, one hopes that this will be the beginning of a process that will eventually lead to peace. I have to say, one has to be very you need to be proud in a way of what Qatar have actually achieved here. And, the political maturity from the Arab world in dealing with this problem from the beginning is perhaps one of the biggest lessons we have learned during this whole crisis, that from the bigger Arab world, we have seen a lot of maturity in how they have dealt with this crisis, and perhaps more than even some of the Western states. And it is perhaps an indication that for this conflict to be resolved, perhaps it's time for the Middle East themselves to take ownership of this conflict and to resolve it from perhaps not a global perspective, but more from a regional perspective. And I think this is precisely what we are witnessing at the moment. One should actually be very proud of the fact that this has been a deal and a truce that has been, orchestrated from within the Middle East region.
I imagine there will be many academic papers written about this moment as well going into the future. Professor Abel Esterhuyse is with the School for Security and Africa Studies at Stellenbosch University.